Hey everyone, my name is Derek Mitchell. I'm with Mathematics Communications Team. My pronouns are he, him, and his. Thank you for attending today's REL Central webinar for supporting a more diverse teacher workforce, research and promising approaches efforts in Colorado. Before we begin, please keep in mind the following housekeeping items. This session is being recorded. All participants have been muted upon entry for the best sound quality possible. You may enter questions via the chat panel or use the raise hand feature, and we'll do our best to address as many questions as possible during today's meeting. If you would like to enable closed captioning, please click the closed captioning icon on the lower left corner of your screen. Press Ctrl-Shift-A to enable closed captioning. One other item, if you would like to add your pronouns or your affiliation, you can do that by right-clicking on your name and clicking Edit Your Display Name. That will allow you to add your pronouns and, as I mentioned, add your affiliation. Now, I'm pleased to turn the virtual mic over to our presenter, Stephen Myers, the REL Central Overall Partnership Lead. Stephen, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Derek, and welcome everybody. So my name is Steve Meyer. I work with Regional Educational Laboratory, or REL Central. REL Central is one of 10 research centers funded by the U.S. Department of Education's Institute of Education Sciences to partner with policymakers, education systems, and communities to improve outcomes for learners in its region, uh, learners from early childhood to adulthood. So in our work, we work side by side with our partners to deeply understand their needs and priorities and co-develop solutions through the training, coaching, and technical assistance, as well as applied research and dissemination. All of our work is carried out in partnership with education stakeholders. And in the central region, which includes Colorado and 6 other states, we currently have 9 partnerships focused on a variety of topics. Today's webinar is connected to our Teacher Diversity in Colorado partnership, which brings together stakeholders from the Colorado Department of Education, Colorado Department of Higher Education, educator preparation programs, and school districts to promote increased diversity within the teacher workforce. And before we get started, what I'd like to do is just a quick poll to spend about 2 minutes so that we all have a sense of kind of who's on the call with us today. So you'll obviously be introduced to us, the presenters, but wanted to hear from everyone about your role. So we're going to put up a poll in just a second, and when you see it, if you could please just choose the category that best describes your professional role, and then we'll share out a summary. We'll just leave this up for about a minute. Just another 5 seconds or so. Okay, so it looks like we've got a pretty even mix of researchers and people in an other category. And then we've got a couple folks who are representing state education agencies, districts, and schools. So great, thank you for that. Can we go to the next slide, please? Great, and one more. Thanks. So this webinar today is the first of 2 that we have planned for early this year that are focused on diversity in the teacher workforce. We're excited today to feature examples of research on this topic, as well as hear from colleagues in Colorado who are working on addressing this challenge. I'll provide an overview of the session and introduce our first presenter, and then we'll be introducing the next presenters kind of in advance of their respective presentations. Next slide, please. So this slide summarizes our objectives for today, and addressing these objectives, we'll first be hearing from Carolyn Haug from the Colorado Department of Education, who will share information about the teaching workforce nationally and in Colorado, research about the benefits associated with the diverse teaching workforce, and legislative efforts in Colorado to promote teacher diversity. Next, Emma Espel-Villarreal from REL Central will discuss research on this topic, including some examples of promising approaches. And then we'll hear from colleagues at the University of Northern Colorado's Center for Urban Education, who will describe their efforts to support a diverse teacher workforce, which include a paraprofessional to educator pipeline serving urban schools. And finally, we'll hear from colleagues representing a partnership between the University of Colorado in Colorado Springs and the Callahan School District to support a diverse teacher workforce in rural districts through a teacher apprenticeship program. So I want to remind folks that throughout this presentation, or I should invite folks to use the chat. So there's a chat box where you have the option of submitting comments or questions, either to the entire group, to everyone, or to panelists. Either will be reviewing things that are posted to both of those groups. And if you have questions during the presentation, please post those there. We'll be reviewing those kind of throughout, and then we'll stop to address a few kind of at the end of each presentation, and then we'll leave time at the end for a longer Q&A session. So to kick things off, I'd like to introduce our first presenter. Dr. Carolyn Haug is the Director of Research and Impact in the Educator Talent Division of the Colorado Department of Education. She leads the development and implementation of the department's educator talent research and evaluation activities focused on bringing transparency to workforce issues related to the educator pipeline. Welcome, Carolyn.
Thank you, Steve. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. So as Steve said, I'm going to provide some context to the discussion. We'll start with a little bit of national data, and then we will shift over to Colorado data on the workforce and workforce diversity, and more generally, the educator workforce recruitment and retention issues that we're experiencing here. Okay, so this first slide, looking back at national data spanning about 3 decades, the teaching workforce has been less diverse than the student population in our country. There have been more white teachers than students, and fewer teachers of color relative to students of color. This slide shows the proportion of the US student and teacher populations from 87-88 to about 30 years later in 2018-19. So for example, if we look at the bar for the white students and teachers, this shows how these proportions have decreased over time. In 87-88, 71% of students were white, and 30 years later, this had dropped to 47% of the student population. So this is an illustration of how diverse our classrooms have become. At the same time, we see that the proportion of white teachers has only decreased from 87% to 79%. So our workforce continues to be mostly white, even though the student population is changing. And in particular, if we look at our Hispanic students, that group has grown from 11 to 27% of the student population during this time frame. Yet the percentage of Hispanic teachers has only increased from 3 to 9%. So although this is growth, the percentage of Hispanic teachers, the ratio of Hispanic teachers to students is still quite disproportionate. Next slide, please. So in this slide, we see the distribution of teacher diversity across schools that have a variety of student diversity. So along the bottom are types of schools. For example, in that first category, we see schools that have more than 50% white non-Hispanic students. In those schools, 93% of teachers were white in 2017-18, so that is the year reflected in this data. So in schools where the students were predominantly white, 93% of the teachers were also white. And we see that teachers of a given race or ethnicity were more often found to be in a school where most of the student body had a similar race or ethnicity. So then if we look at the schools where there were more than 50% of the students who were Black, non-Hispanic, so that's that second set of bars, we see that 36% of the teachers in those schools were Black. So that's where we see the largest percentage of Black teachers were in schools where the students were predominantly Black. But at the same time, even when the majority of students in the school were not white, most of the teachers were still white. So if we stay and continue to look at the schools with 50% or more of Black students and 36% Black teachers, we see that there were still 54% of the teachers who were white. So it's a smaller percentage than in the predominantly white schools, but still over half. So, and we see this pattern in each of the other examples of schools with diverse students in the graphs. Next slide, thank you. So now I'm going to shift to some of the Colorado context, and then we'll talk a little bit about the workforce diversity and then policies that have been passed in recent years to address this need. So in Colorado, at the State Department of Education, the educator workforce is recognized as a critical area of focus, along with other priority areas like early literacy, post-secondary readiness, etc. There's a high priority on developing a strong and diverse educator pipeline, and this is highlighted as a stated goal: high quality educators in every classroom, strong leaders in every building. This is the goal in our department's strategic plan. Next slide, please. Thank you. So for some context in terms of our actual workforce diversity, this slide contains a breakdown by gender and race ethnicity of the population of Colorado teachers from last school year. This distribution of Colorado teachers is not unusual. It looks very much like the national data we just looked at, and it very well may look similar to your state's distribution as well, if you aren't in Colorado. So the vast majority of the teachers in Colorado are white, with only about 14% being persons of color. If we look at the second pie chart, where it also breaks down the workforce by gender, we see that there are about 4% males of color and 10% females of color in our Colorado workforce, in our teaching force. And we have about 21% white males, with the remaining 65% of teachers being white female. And this graph is explanation of why diversifying our teacher workforce is a critical state concern. Even more so, while our rural areas have a largely diverse student population, much like our metro urban areas, but in our rural areas, most of our educators continue to be white. Most of our diverse educators actually teach in the urban and suburban areas of the state. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. So now that we've looked at the diversity of the current workforce, you may be wondering if that's likely to change soon due to perhaps a more diverse set of educators coming out of our preparation programs. This slide shows our most recent set of graduates and their attributes in comparison to Colorado's student diversity. The first thing to notice is that the graduates are definitely more diverse than our current workforce. In total, Colorado prep programs had 23% diverse completers in 2020-21, which is the data reflected here. We had 23%, and that's compared to the 14% of diverse teachers in the workforce that we saw in the earlier slide. So this 23% would include Hispanic, our Hispanic educators, our Black educators, also our Asian, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander. It would be all of our diverse educators. So it's a total of 23%. While encouraging, the proportion does not approach our student diversity, it's particularly in terms of our Hispanic students. However, if this trend continues, we'll probably see an eventual shift in our overall workforce. Now, I say probably because we also know that not all of our prep program completers from Colorado programs go on to teach in the Colorado public schools. Hopefully, those that do will reflect this diversity. A workforce transition like this could take quite some time. And we're also uncertain, though, if the trend in completer diversity will continue. So there's some wonderings there, some uncertainty. And we can go to the next slide. So this slide is a map that illustrates the differences in the ratio of students of color to teachers of color in every school district in the state of Colorado. And the way to read this map is to know that this pale yellow color indicates a balanced ratio. So like, for example, in those districts that are pale yellow, you might have 10 students of color and 10 teachers of color for a ratio of 10 to 10 or 1. The darker the color, the more saturated the color, the larger the discrepancy between the students of color and the teachers of color. So if you look at the districts, and you'll see there are several in this very dark purple color, that, for example, might be a situation where you have, say, 1,000 students of color and 10 teachers of color. So the darker the color, the larger that discrepancy is. And then also of note is that all the districts that are in gray actually have no teachers of color. These are some of our very rural areas, and we do have a large Hispanic population, student population in many parts of the state, including these rural areas, but we have no teachers of color. We can go to the next slide. So you may want, or why is workforce diversity a concern? This slide contains just a few highlights from some recent research on the benefits of a diverse teaching force. And I know we're going to hear more about this from Emma in just a minute, so I'm only going to touch on it briefly. The research is pretty clear that a diverse teaching force benefits all students. Students of color who have teachers of color have improved academic achievement and graduation rates. They're more likely to plan and to attend college and be more engaged with school. White students also benefit from diversity in their teachers. They have more exposure to positive interactions with adults from different backgrounds and potentially increase cultural competence and awareness. Building a diverse teacher workforce may also support job satisfaction among teachers of color by counteracting feelings of isolation and frustration. So these are just a few of the benefits, and as I said, you'll hear more about this later in the webinar. And we can go to the next slide. So now I'm going to turn to some of the state policy, and this is just, these are excerpts from some of the state policy, so it's not really an exhaustive list. But over the past 5 years or so, the Colorado legislature has passed some significant pieces of legislation that have made it possible for us to focus a spotlight on this educator workforce and the issues we're facing. So on this slide and the next one, I've listed some of the pieces of legislation that have really impacted teacher diversity. For the last 5 years, Colorado has participated in the Diverse and Learner Ready Teachers Initiative. And the purpose of this is to identify strategies that would support the racial diversity of our educator workforce. This work is supported by more than 30 national organizations and engaged in by 10 states. And then in 2021, we passed House Bill 1010, which convened a stakeholder group to identify barriers specific to recruiting, preparing, and retaining a diverse workforce, and strategies to increase the diversity of that workforce. And this stakeholder group generated a set of recommendations that were many, and it included things such as investing in grow your own strategies, addressing longstanding concerns about compensation in Colorado, providing mentorship opportunities, supporting districts to address implicit bias and microaggressions in the workplace, provide paid student teaching and/or residencies during clinical experience, allow multiple ways to demonstrate content competency for licensure, and others. And interestingly, many of these recommendations have actually resulted in additional legislation. So we can go to the next slide. In the last two, I'm just going to mention a couple more things on this slide. In the last two legislative sessions, there's been a focus on the importance of high quality clinical experiences and a great concern over the cost of candidates of participating in them, both in terms of paying tuition and also in terms of lost salary. So this has led to two substantial investments in the workforce that really help all candidates be able to afford high quality preparation. And it specifically helps us support more diverse candidates. So first, in 2021, Senate Bill 185 established the Educator Recruitment Retention Program. And this provides $10,000 stipends to cover candidate preparation program costs. In addition to that, this bill also staffed a new recruitment retention office at the State Department, which provides field-based experts who are on call to districts and potential candidates. Then the following year, House Bill 1220 was passed. So that was just the last legislative session. And this provides additional stipends of between $11,000 and $22,000. And that is to cover costs of clinical experiences for candidates in traditional programs. The $11,000 is for a one semester student teaching model, and the $22,000 is for a full year teacher residency model. And then lastly, Senate Bill 185, the same one I just spoke about with the ERR program, also created another pathway into the profession for high school students. This created the Teacher Recruitment, Education, and Preparation Program, which is often called TREP. And it makes it much more affordable for high school students to prepare to become teachers. So again, these are really just highlights of the state legislation that we've seen in past years that is aimed at supporting the workforce issues. And I think we anticipate potentially seeing additional bills passed this year to address the very same issues. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Steve and Emma.
Great. Thank you so much, Carolyn. It's a very helpful overview. As I mentioned, we'll be talking at the end and have an opportunity for questions and answers, but wanted to just pause and share a couple things that were in the chat. One is just the observation when you were presenting data about Colorado about the prevalence of educator, student, and preparation program completers of color, that those patterns are similar in Washington and many other states, like you were saying. And then a couple questions, just follow-up questions. One was if you have any data about teacher preparation and the preparation of educators of color that is outside of the typical 4-year teacher prep program, if it's been disaggregated that way.
Yeah, great question. We do actually. So the data I was sharing earlier is reflective of both our traditional programs and our alternative routes to licensure. We actually do disaggregate the data in those two, according to those two pathways. And we have an entire dashboard that allows you to sort of slice and dice data. I'll drop it in the chat here in just a second. One thing that we have noticed is that our alternative pathway has so far produced more diverse candidates than our traditional pathway.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I think that's consistent with the experiences in other states too. Just one other quick question is, and recognizing that these legislative efforts and sort of the availability of stipends and the TREP program are relatively new, but just wondering what if anything you know so far about who's taking advantage of those opportunities and how they've been helping with recruitment.
So we have, I don't have an answer to who's taking advantage of them yet. We actually just closed the application for the ERR applications or stipends. We have actually distributed $5 million this year in the those $10,000 stipends. So we will be taking a look at who's taking advantage of those in terms of gender, ethnicity, and also endorsement area.
Great. All right, thank you. So again, I urge people, if you have questions during these presentations, please post them in the chat. And now I would like to hand it over to my REL Central colleague, Emma Espelville-Real, who will talk about examples of evidence-based policies and practices and the types of research that support them. Over to you, Emma.
Thank you, Steve. As Steve mentioned, I work with REL Central and the partnership in Colorado focused on teacher diversity. I would now like to share some information about the research that is focused on strategies to diversify the teaching workforce. What I'm going to share today is not meant to be a systematic or comprehensive literature review and does not reflect all of the research on this topic. We have chosen some studies of promising practices to highlight as a way to provide an introduction to the research literature on this topic. As I share example studies, I plan to provide some background about the topics examined, the methods used, and some selected findings. These studies were identified in fall 2022 as part of RMC's work with the Western Equity Assistance Center. We conducted a keyword search and scanned abstracts to help identify some studies that were potentially correlational or causal. And this is a very early stages of this. And what resulted was a list of some studies that really had a wide range of designs and methodology. Some are less rigorous, which might reduce the validity of their conclusions. And I will also mention that not all studies we talk about today have been evaluated against rigorous criteria, like the What Works Clearinghouse. But in summary, I really hope what I share here today is some examples of studies that do seem to demonstrate promising approaches to build a more diverse teaching workforce. And I think you'll notice that some of them really do dovetail on with what Carolyn was talking about as well in terms of strategies. After I speak, you'll hear directly from two programs that are seeking to do just that, diversify the workforce. Several studies have examined first how the characteristics of a school or district or the context where teachers work is related to their retention. It's probably no surprise that leadership seems to matter. The studies referenced here offer examples of some large studies, including, for example, a study that used administrative data for teachers across North Carolina, along with a survey of teachers across New York City, and another that used a national data set with a focus on early career teachers. These studies consistently found stronger or more effective leadership was related to better retention for teachers of color, and they primarily focused on Black educators. Aligned with leadership support, teachers of color were more likely to stay or have intentions to remain in the teaching profession when they had higher quality professional development. The study referenced here by Moyer, Packenham et al. From 2009 found that higher retention in schools and districts with more students of color when the teachers were offered high quality professional development in STEM related topics. Carolyn also presented some slides earlier that showed that teachers of color were more often to be found in a school where students had a similar or racial or ethnic background. The distribution is also reflected when considering teacher retention. So the same study of teachers in North Carolina that I mentioned earlier on this slide found that Black teachers were more likely to be retained in schools with a population of Black students that was over 40%. Finally, I'd like to mention while certification exams are often designed to support credentialing and teacher quality, it is also documented that certification exams could be considered a barrier to entry into the profession for teachers. For example, candidates of color were less likely to retake this any certification exam after they had failed a first time compared to white teachers with similar scores. And among first-time test takers of color, as candidates got further from the passing score, the likelihood they would retake the exam decreased. So one possible barrier there is the cost of completing multiple certification exams and potentially needing to retake some can pose a barrier for pre-service teachers. Financial support has been one strategy implemented to address this barrier. These contextual factors can be addressed with particular strategies like supporting effective leadership, providing professional development opportunities, and offering stipends to support the costs of certification exams and support to teachers for completing certification exams. Some preparation programs have been designed specifically to address barriers into the teaching profession by reducing the amount of time it takes to obtain certification and providing more opportunities for training under strong guidance and in front of classrooms. A study I'm going to talk about now talks about alternative programs like Teach for America, as well as residency models, which Carolyn mentioned earlier. Alternative programs can occur outside of traditional undergraduate teaching degrees. Teach for America is a pretty well-known example of this. Residencies are also gaining traction, and while they can be defined differently across preparation programs, they generally operate with the idea that teachers who have more hands-on training with mentorship, like a clinical setting we often see in medical models, are often more likely to be well prepared to enter the classroom and stay in the classroom. So Yang An and Corey Codell studied Teach for America, as well as a residency model called the Kansas City Teacher Residency Program. And they looked at teacher workforce diversity. They were particularly interested in how teachers prepared by these two programs were employed around Kansas City schools and their relationship with the local area teacher diversity. They also examined student achievement of their students using value-added models. They found that teachers prepared by both of these programs tended to be more racially and ethnically diverse compared to the labor market of the larger Kansas City area, which included, I think, up to 32 districts. These teachers also had higher value-added or VAM scores compared to teachers who did not go through these programs. So not only were these programs related to increased diversity, but they were also linked to improved student achievement. Furthermore, the study found that Teach for America was associated with higher early career retention after 1 and 2 years, but not after 5 years. And the Kansas City Teacher Residency Program had higher retention overall after 1 and 2 years compared to teachers who didn't go through these programs. Because of the timing of this study, which was 2012 to 2020, there was not an opportunity to look at the 5-year outcome retention data for the Kansas City Teacher Residency Program. Another set of studies have been exploring how recruitment into the teaching profession can help address the diversity of the teaching workforce. Many such studies consider Grow Your Own programs, which Carolyn also mentioned earlier, with the idea that students who want to serve their community could be supported starting early on in their K-12 education, and their development as a teacher can be fostered within their community, which has the chance to provide more supports for them to be retained in that community as well as teachers. In another example, Carruthers and colleagues examined a summer program that aimed to encourage high school students to enter the teaching profession. Their strategy was called EduCamp, which involved opportunities for both dual enrollment and a summer experience related to teaching for high schoolers, so they could attend at a partner university to experience the teaching profession. The recruitment included and was focused on students of diverse racial and ethnic backgrounds. The researchers administered pre and post surveys in 2018. It had some rating scales and had some open-ended, more qualitative items. And there were 38 students who participated. Of these students, over half of them identified as racial or ethnic minorities. They they suggested that they would be more prepared to teach a lesson, enroll in college, and create plans to enter the teaching workforce. Notably, this study was limited in the conclusions that can be drawn because of the correlational and qualitative nature of the design, and this program was created to address specific local needs. However, these types of partnerships between universities and districts do have the opportunity to provide a more supportive pipeline as teachers of color choose to enter the workforce. Another study conducted by Wade James and colleagues examined how particular strategies used at historically Black colleges and university, how they were used and how successful they were at recruiting minority teaching candidates, and based on the premise that HBCUs successfully prepare teachers of color. In fall 2018, 18 representatives of HBCUs completed a survey about this topic and were most likely to use strategies like words of mouth, financial aid, in-house scholarships, and local community recruitment. They were also, this was pretty similar to those that seemed out the most frequent applications, in addition to flexibility with licensure and degree completion. The study identified an interesting framework for considering recruitment strategies. So while these studies do provide are not a representation of all of the research on this topic, I hope that, one point we could take from this is that there are varied findings about strategies for recruitment and retention, but there are some possible strategies that include contextual considerations, alternative or residency preparation programs, early exposure and recruitment through word of mouth, financial aid, local communities, and flexible certification options. To synthesize this, I would say these strategies do tend to align with a report that Carver Thomas put out in 2018 with Learning Policy Institute that really synthesizes a lot of literature on this topic and suggests promising practices can include things like building a high retention and supportive pathways into teaching, creating proactive hiring and induction strategies, and improving school teaching conditions through improved school leadership. As we think about promising practices, I'd now like to turn it over to Roseanne Fulton and Joanna Ross to talk about a specific example of this type of work going on at the University of Northern Colorado. Roseanne Fulton is the director of the Center for Urban Education, with experience as the Chief Equity Engagement Officer in Aurora Public Schools, as well as several district and school administrative leadership and teaching positions. Dr. Fulton has devoted her career to addressing educational equity and meeting the needs of all students. Joanna Ross is originally from New York City. She has worked in education for the past 12 years as a social studies teacher and coach. Currently, she's working on her doctorate and is the assistant director at UNC's Center of Urban Education. So welcome, Roseanne and Joanna.
Roseanne, I can't hear you. I think you may be muted.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry about that, for everybody on the call. Thanks a lot, Emma, and thanks, Carolyn, for setting the context so well. We are really excited to be part of the presentation today and to share some of the good news we have at the Center for Urban Education. The main campus for the University of Northern Colorado is in Greeley, which is about an hour and a half from Denver, and our campus is here in the Denver metro area. So if you could switch to the next slide, that would be great. And the next one too, thank you. Great. So we are leading a Grow Your Own program in the Denver metro area. Our campus is right on the border of the Denver Public Schools and Aurora Public Schools. Denver Public Schools has 2,200 people who are serving as paraprofessionals in the district. And so our work is to recruit paraprofessionals. So all of our students work in schools in the mornings, and then they come to our campus for classes in the afternoons. We have some evening classes, we have some weekend classes, we have some online classes. What we do is think carefully about a multifaceted approach to supporting our teacher candidate success. And I think there's some main components. One is we're real serious about getting people of color as faculty members and mentors at our center, so that our teacher candidates of color have role models and people who can understand their race and their culture. It's a huge piece of the success that we're experiencing. We are serious about using culturally responsive teaching strategies in all the coursework that we provide and in the support that we provide in the mentoring relationship. So the state of Colorado says that everyone must have at least 800 hours of field-based experiences to get a teaching license in Colorado. And our students end up with 3,000 or 4,000 hours of work in schools before they graduate. The significant thing is that our students benefit from the coursework that we provide here at the center and the support that we can provide. But I tell you what, our students learn so much from the school principals, assistant principals, literacy coaches, cooperating teachers in the schools. So the marriage between practical experiences and then the theory that we can provide within the teacher preparation coursework is really, really important. We are just tireless in the support that we provide, and we say wraparound support. So whatever students need, we just don't run out of love and compassion for the students, for the kinds of issues that come up for them as they're on this journey. And one of my favorite researchers is Jeff Duncan Andrade, and he talks about audacious hope and audacious love. And what does that really mean? And we're serious about trying one thing and then trying a second thing and trying a third thing and a fourth thing to be able to support people so that they can be successful. We have a 5-minute video, if you guys don't mind going to the next screen, that has the voices of some of our students. And so I just think the video is so important. So we'll just listen to that. And then we have a couple of more details, and we can definitely help with any questions people have.
What we're about is making sure that our graduates are prepared to be successful in urban classrooms.
Our students tend to be a diverse population. We have students who speak English as their second language. We have students that are a change of career, their parents themselves.
At this moment, we have 60% students of color. We work hard at being allies for one another across racial lines so that we can support people's dreams.
As a mom, I needed time, I need to work, and I need to get the experience that I need when I'm going to find a job. So when I hear about this program, working on the mornings and then go to school and be out like at 4 o'clock, so I have time for my son, for my students, and I can get money too, it works perfectly.
When I moved to Denver a few years ago, I was ready to give up hope on going back to school to be a teacher. And then I stumbled upon the CUE. They want me to have success here, and I've actually felt like I'm important here.
Our population right now is more than 95% first-generation college students.
I'll be the first to graduate with a bachelor's degree from my family. I am also the first-generation student. I came here as a refugee, getting this opportunity to get higher education, working for what I like to do, like a passion. So it's really a great experience here.
I'm actually going to be the first graduate, so yay. Yeah, you too.
Our students quite like that our program is the combination of classes along with practical daily training.
You are getting real-world experience from day one. You are required to work in a school, and then you come here and then you do theory.
I can easily say that what we learn in the classrooms we can implement immediately.
It's so fresh of what we just learned that night before, and then just the next morning I'm in the classroom dealing with what we just talked about.
The state of Colorado says you have to have at least 800 hours to get a teaching license, and our students end up with 3,000 or 4,000 hours.
It allows you to get firsthand feedback from someone who's done it for a long time. And it's really great to get that instantaneous feedback when you're at your job site.
My mentor comes and sees me in my actual classroom. So not only is she getting to see me in action, but she immediately can give me that feedback that can either be, hey, I love what you did with this, or why don't we try this next time?
They always started out with a positive, and that was inspiring. And I found my niche because of this program and the amazing mentors.
We tend to have a small population here, which allows us the opportunity to individualize for our students.
I think it's the only place that I've ever seen where the administration here knows every student's name.
The classes are so much centered on how do we help these students develop into the best teacher they can be.
Another plus to this program is that it's run by teachers and former principals. You're getting an enormous amount of experience in your professor staff.
It is very much a community experience for our students.
You know, as the students, I brought them to the Center for Urban Education, and several of them indicated that they had gone to a four-year school, but they didn't feel that rapport with the staff or with each other. And then they said that this is more of a family, and they know that if they need help, they will get the help.
The community that we have here, I think, is so great. You have like your own support system here.
There's this great camaraderie and collaboration and communication between everyone. Everyone wants each other to thrive and do well and succeed and just be the best possible future teachers that they can be.
When they graduate, they are some of the most competent and compassionate educators.
I just feel like I've gained so much knowledge and confidence through this program.
By the time I graduate, I'm going to have countless hours under my belt working in a classroom, working with students.
I just feel that this was my place, and every day I feel like more excited to become a teacher.
We're really hoping to expand our program to grow the numbers, because I think we're filling a very important niche in the Denver metro area.
The program has had a tremendous personal impact on me. I struggled for years, and I just couldn't get through traditional programs. And we found this program. I feel in alignment.
I never thought I was going to go to college. And so the fact that I'm here, I mean, that means the world to me, and nobody can take this away after I'm done. I got this. I did it.
It's fun to watch the video over and over. Most of the students that are in the video are now teaching in the Denver metropolitan area. So one of the things we know about a Grow Your Own program is that people are wedded to the communities. They want to be able to give back. So if you don't mind going to the next slide, that would be great. So they graduate from one of the high schools in Aurora Public Schools, and then they want to serve the Aurora Public Schools community. So just thinking about what is possible, we have right now more than 90% first generation college students. And what we know, there's just a lot of research about what do we have to do at the higher ed level to support first generation college students. And I love one of the books that we read where the middle section of the book is how do universities, how do teacher preparation programs reimagine themselves to be able to meet the needs of the people that we really need to serve. I believe that first generation college students are our new normal, and that we don't have to tolerate a teacher shortage, and we also don't have to tolerate the big discrepancies that Carolyn talked about with race and ethnicity and the imbalance of demographics between students in public schools and our teachers. I think we just have to get real serious about meeting the needs of our first generation college students and our people of color, our teacher candidates of color, and taking good care of where they're really coming from and how we're going to help them move forward. So we have more than 70% right now, teachers of color and teacher candidates of color, and we have a 95% job placement rate at graduation. I mean, at this point, I probably field, 4 or 5 calls a month from building principals, school district principals, who want to hire our candidates before they graduate, because what I say is it's not rocket science. Our students are in the schools. They're learning so much from the leaders in those schools, and the principals have a lot of good information about who this person is as a teacher. So we have just like I said, a high job placement rate, and we're analyzing our retention rate. So how many of our graduates are teaching 3 and 4 and 5 years later? And the latest, it's a informal count, but we're right at 75 or 80% of the people are still teaching. We have paraprofessionals in about 75 different schools in the Denver metropolitan area, and our success is really based on the relationships that we have with the principals and assistant principals and people in the schools. It really does take a village to produce teachers that are going to make a difference and for all students. I was in a meeting over the summer, and somebody said, what are you doing at your center about the cynicism and the people who want to leave the profession and the negativity that seems to permeate current teachers and current faculty meetings. And I couldn't relate to the question because it's just that's not what we do at the center. The people who are our teacher candidates here are so grateful for the support that we can provide for them. And that's at our center and in our schools, but they're so glad to have an opportunity to move forward from, an hourly position to a professional teacher. So Joanna just got hired in the fall. She started in November, and we are so fortunate, Joanna, to have you as part of our work, because what we want to do is grow, and what we have some attention now from some external funders who are very interested in the conversation about diversifying the teacher workforce at the same time that we mitigate teacher shortages across the Denver metro area. So we're poised to really be helpful to schools and school districts, and it's really very, very compelling work. So our last slide has just some resources. Can you move forward? Please, yeah. And so we have a nice website, and there's some good documentation there, and we'll see if there's questions now or after the next presentation, right? Emma, is that right?
Sure, yeah. One question that came in, Roseanne, is if there's anything else you can share about how the program operates, how it's delivered at UNC.
Yeah. So as I said earlier, all of our students are paraprofessionals in the mornings in schools. So they get hired in the school districts and in the schools. And then they come here for classes that start at about 1 in the afternoon. So we have afternoon classes, we have some evening classes, and some Saturday classes. But it really is where we build our schedule around the fact that everybody's working with children in the mornings. So I say to our students all the time, you do have a full-time job. Half of your job is working with children in schools in the mornings, and the other part of your job is taking classes so that you can get your, earn your degree. About 70% of our students are transfer students from the community colleges, so I just love working for UNC because I've got some nice flexibility to accept those credits from other institutions and to get students onto a path to graduation. And we are real serious at the center of helping people graduate expeditiously. So that they can, some of our students are 40, 48 years old, and they've got 10 years of experience already in schools. What we want to do is honor the expertise that they have and then help them get their degree as quickly as they can. And so I hope that's enough specifics about how our program operates, but it really is an important structure so that students have time in their day to be in schools. They have time to take their coursework, and then 40% of our students are mothers or fathers, and so they also then have time in the evenings to continue to be, good family members. So thanks.
Thanks so much, Roseanne, and congratulations on your great work. There's messages in the chat that say amazing work, and it's really exciting to hear about that work. I'm going to turn it over now to our other partners, and to introduce them, I'd like to say, so we have Daniel DeSellis, David Slathauer, and Stephanie Curtis. Daniel DeSellis is the Director of Teacher Education at the University of Colorado in Colorado Springs, and in his current role, he works with student teachers across disciplines, collaborates with local and state educators on accountability and reform efforts, and teaches courses in English methods, positive classroom management, and arts integration. David Slathauer is the superintendent for the Calhoun School District. Mr. Slathauer leads the small rural district of 470 students in a wide variety of roles, ranging from chief executive officer to vehicle driver. The CTAP program has a current enrollment of 13 apprentices across 8 rural districts, and is one of the initiatives he's been leading. Mr. Slathauer has briefed alternative teacher recruitment strategies to multiple state and federal audiences. And Stephanie Curtis is the Dean of Instruction at Calhoun Secondary Schools. She is the primary administrator of the Calhoun Apprenticeship and the executive director of the Teacher Apprentice Sponsor Coaching and Collaboration, or TASK LLC. Stephanie is an instructor for the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, and teaches the courses that individuals under the Calhoun Apprenticeship are taking. Welcome, team, and thank you for being here today.
Well, hello, everyone, and greetings from a very snowy Colorado. We're in about hour 14 of a pretty significant winter storm at the moment. But what our intent today, and by the way, I think I have to say, as a rural school administrator, how encouraged I am to hear about all the effort and initiatives to address what is a pretty dire shortage. And I think you're going to recognize some of the themes in our presentation with a more rural focus, perhaps a more local focus, and we're going to offer you an overview of what our approach to this is, and look at it as perhaps notes from the field. Could I have the next slide, please? So as I said, just a quick overview, some context about that, some of the mechanics of what it is we're doing is how this actually gets implemented, and some notes about our progress to date. Next slide, please. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. DeSellis. Doctor, I think you're muted.
You would think after so many years of doing this, we'd all be good at it. Well, good morning. My name's Dan DeSells, and in addition to my role with UCCS, I'm a former 7th grade middle school teacher from Rhode Island's smallest, poorest, and most diverse community of Central Falls, where I saw the same same concerns raised here about the homogeneity of our teaching workforce. It's an honor today to join my Calhan colleagues and speak to you about one of our partnership endeavors in teacher apprenticeships. While there's a significant number of contingents within our community who have been underrepresented or not represented at all in the teaching profession, the group we're going to speak about today is paraprofessionals, or otherwise known as teacher assistants or staff members who, with the right guidance, education, training, and support, can make outstanding teachers. Now, we know that the financial costs of becoming a teacher, especially in comparison to the monetary gains of being a teacher, are one of the most significant barriers to underrepresented groups following traditional routes into the classroom. To put a finer point on some of Carolyn's earlier comments, you can see on this slide the bare numbers. Even from the perspective of a public university with in-state tuition, we're looking at a triangulated discrepancy that seems almost insurmountable. So the question at the bottom of the slide that got cut off is, who will be able to afford this? And let's be honest, it's the same people who can afford it right now, a narrow demographic who can afford to be poor. At best, this perpetuates the status quo, and in its extreme, it makes teaching an exclusive endeavor of the leisure class. Now, let's return to paraprofessionals. These are skilled and experienced individuals embedded in their communities who have already demonstrated proficiencies in working with youth. What if these individuals had a shot, a real shot at moving into full-time licensed teaching? How can we provide a jump start to this new career path, especially at a distance? What could that do for authentic representation in the classroom, to strengthen school and community and university partnerships, and to provide folks job skills and genuine economic mobility? Now, teacher apprenticeships are a strong answer to these questions, as are rich, thoughtful, and mutually beneficial partnerships between universities and school districts. I'd like to turn things back over to you, David.
Next slide, please. So very quickly, to give you some context, we are a small rural district in the northeastern part of El Paso County. What I want to do is bring your attention to really give you some numbers to make this shortage of teachers real for you. At the end of last school year, when we looked at our turnover, we were looking at many open positions. We were unable to staff our building. It's very common for me and my rural colleagues to post for a teaching position for 6 months and receive no applications. And so that was really the genesis when we began to look for a solution to this. Next slide, please. What we saw was, as we went through the pandemic, we realized how heavily we had relied upon our paraprofessionals, some of which have been with us for 22 years, delivering instruction. And we realized, of course, at that point, that that was our most readily available workforce. It was right in our building, right in our community. And so we began to explore the ways that it really began as a way to train our paras more robustly. And then with the help of UCCS, we realized we were very close to establishing a registered apprenticeship program recognized by the U.S. Department of Labor, and that's the course we took. Next slide, please. At this point, I'd like to introduce you to Stephanie. She'll talk a little bit about the mechanics of how this all works. Stephanie.
Hey, so hi, I'm Stephanie Curtis, Dean of Instruction in Calhan, and the person that runs most of the apprenticeship there with the help of Dave. As you can see from this slide, one way that we are meeting the need for increased economic mobility for our community is by offering apprentice teachers to come into the program at a wage much higher than what is considered a living wage, which is currently at a little over $19 per hour. We're starting our apprentice teachers at $26.50 an hour, which is about $34,000 a year. This wage is also higher than what we pay a long-term substitute and comes with benefits that the district offers to all contracted individuals. Dr. Katie Anderson Pence, so when we're looking at the apprenticeship costs and wages, We want to make sure that the individual has money to be able to afford to live, but we also want to be able to make sure we can support them through getting their education. So Dr. Katie Anderson-Pence with UCCS was able to get our apprenticeship courses offered through the Extended Studies Department at a much lower cost than they are traditionally offered. Currently, we have funding where we are, as a district, able to pay for these courses, which Dave will talk about a little bit later in the program. Next slide, please.
So at the end of the day, I think what's interesting about the times in which we live and work is that as we hear so much and talk so much about the teacher exodus, I think my fellow presenters would agree, we're also aware that there's a large population that really would like to join us in our work, but they can't discover the way into our profession. And so what this was about, we're a community that is very economically diverse and increasingly culturally, racially, and ethnically diverse. And we had to find a way to access that portion of the population that wanted to join us and to reduce those barriers, those economic barriers, for those people who thought that the chance to become a teacher had passed them by. And I want to bring your attention to, in addition to, so the benefits of this, obviously there's the immediate benefit that in employing this approach, we were able to staff our building. And I'm happy to tell you that we're 100% staffed. But there's a second benefit that I really want to bring your attention to. And it addresses a developing issue within our district, that being, and I think it's been alluded to earlier in this presentation, while as Colorado Springs moves east, our community becomes more and more racially, culturally, and ethnically diverse, while our faculty did not. As you're drawing your apprentice candidates from the community, you're at the very same time increasing the diversity of your faculty. So as the demographics of your community changes, this is really designed to draw people into the paraprofessional stance and then into the licensed teaching stance. As your community changes demographically, your faculty is changing along with it by virtue of the fact that from whence you are drawing your candidates. Next slide, please. Stephanie.
Yep. So as Dave explained earlier, as our programs are changing and stuff, and our apprentice, and our paraprofessionals have so much experience, we started looking at like what are the requirements that we want to set up for our apprentices. So the minimum requirements that our apprentice teachers have to meet to enter the program are 2,700 hours or 2 years of experience working with students in an educational setting where they offer direct instruction. They have to have a high school diploma or GED. They must be over 18 years of age, which I know sounds really young, but when you add in that 2 years of experience, it bumps that age up. And then a full-time teaching position within their school or district. Well, in the two-year apprenticeship, the apprentice teacher is supported in accessing their coursework and in completing rigorous teacher competencies aligned closely to the Colorado Department of Education Professional Teacher Quality Standards and the Grow Your Own programs that were designed in Tennessee originally. The apprentice teacher is supported in a wraparound model where their sponsor is also the instructor for their university courses. This gives the apprentice teacher the support of their school administration, their mentor teacher, their district instructional coach, if one is available, and their sponsor, who is also the university instructor. The big thing about this is these individuals have already made the choice to be educators. Paraprofessionals are already in the field, they're already in the classroom, they're already in the communities where they're working. And we want to, and they've already shown a willingness to do the hard things. They're already filling open positions where we do not have any qualified applicants. So what we wanted to do was make sure that they have a way to move beyond just filling a hole to be able to help them advance in their careers. Next slide, please. One of the big ways that we're helping them advance in their careers is through being able to offer a higher pay on their salary schedule. As explained earlier, the teacher shortage is dire. We needed an answer to how do we support a person teaching our students today while we build on how to increase the teacher pipeline over the next few years. This immediate need is what led us to develop our apprenticeship model. We designed our program to be a stepping stone to becoming a teacher. As we know, academic momentum is only built once we get started in the process. Because the Calhan apprenticeship does not end in a full Colorado Department of Education teacher license, we have designed a salary schedule that encourages the apprentice teacher to continue to work towards their BA and a full state certification. When we talk about access, we know that a person has to have access to a salary that allows them to be able to live while they grow in their education and their careers. In Calhan, we are actually increasing this schedule for the upcoming school year, but this model explains how the apprentice teacher's salary increases as they earn credits towards their bachelor's. And I'll give it to Dave to talk a little bit about funding.
Dave, I believe you're muted.
You're absolutely right. I wanted to just mention this real quickly. As I talk to people around the state about this, the question always comes up is how do you pay for this? And so we began, it's a grant funded program. I think you've heard about other funding opportunities that are coming out from the state in this time. I think at its heart, this is a professional development program. So title funds absolutely qualify in this. And then in addition to, in my discussions with people around the country, we are aware that there's huge interest in apprenticeship, particularly in the area of education, not only by the U.S. Department of Education, but by the U.S. Department of Labor as well. And so we are led to believe that there is more funding coming to be distributed in this area. So if you're thinking about pursuing this course, I would ask you to stay in tune with those agencies as we are to see how that develops. Next slide, please. Finally, just want to make sure we make a few points. I think our salary slide was a little distorted there. I think what is one of the key elements is the fact that our apprentice candidates, our apprentices, are on salary, because I think it's not feasible for us to believe that people that don't make a living wage will then go on to pursue their degree, which is the intent, is to encourage all of our apprentices to do that. This is really not an intent on our part to supplant licensed faculty. It's not. It's a local solution to a very local problem and a dire problem, as Stephanie said. We maintain high standards, that they work to the same standards of our licensed faculty. They're required at the completion of the program to pass the praxis and thereby verify mastery in their content area. And one of the things that we like about the program is their time on task, or their on-the-job training, if you will, is extensive, which we feel is real important as I look back at my own experience as a teacher. It was the hands-on part of doing my job that really, I think, developed me into a teacher. Next slide, please. Stephanie.
Yes, so returning to that idea that we were filling these positions with long-term subs. Our paraprofessionals were filling these positions, that we had these openings for teachers. COVID really made it stand out that these people had the knowledge and the wherewithal and everything that was needed to step into those roles to some extent, but not having the methodologies, practices, and pedagogy that a regular teacher has. We wanted to design a program that helped them learn those things while they were being able to fill those positions. So we are currently in our third course from the university. And what we're doing, we're going through these courses and adapting them to meet the needs of the apprentices that are in the program. They're all following the Colorado Department of Higher Education standards that are set in place, but we're able to add in pieces about, like what we're currently doing in our most recent course is really focusing on, here's the state standard, what are the objectives that you're teaching today to get to that standard, and how are you going to be able to have an exit ticket that allows you to know if you were able to teach that standard and get across to the students what you were expecting to in that lesson, taking that data and making decisions for your future teaching as you go. And so really aligning those pieces that a paraprofessional or long-term sub would not have the opportunity to be able to reflect on those practices and be able to really dig into how to become a better teacher and, like I said, learn that pedagogy as they were going along. So next slide, please. The other piece is going into the diversity of our program and being able to talk about what Carolyn Haug explained from the Colorado Department of Education. We know that there is a significant discrepancy in diversity of teachers as compared to the diversity of their students. When we look at the diversity of teachers versus that of our students, we know that sorry. We have the huge difference in the number of white teachers versus the number of teachers of color. And in a recent study, it was found that students of color who have had at least one teacher of the same race in grades 3 through 5 are nearly 40% less likely to drop out of school than those who have not. In El Paso County, where we are located, our diversity demographics are 24% persons of color and 76% white. The diversity division, as spoken about earlier, for Colorado teacher diversity, 14% persons of color and 86% white. As you can see from the slide, the Callahan Teacher Apprenticeship has a higher percentage of persons of color, being 31% as compared to 69% white. 3 of our apprentice teachers are firstborn English speakers who started as paraprofessionals knowing that they wanted to be a part of an education system, but not having a clear path to how to become a teacher due to lack of access. A part of the reason for this is because as we are growing our own, because we are growing our own from individuals in our community, and as these demographics change in our rural communities, we expect that our diversity in our apprenticeship will also continue to grow. And with that part being discussed, I'm going to return it back to Dr. DeSalles.
Knowing that we are very short on time, I will just wrap up with the idea that this partnership with Callahan has been, frankly, nothing short of inspiring, and has led us as a university to start rethinking the ways that we do business with a variety of districts. And one of the results of this inspiration has been a partnership that you'll see advertised on the screen between School District 11 and our Inclusive Early Childhood Licensure and Degree Program. And this is just the start. And I think that's a theme that we're seeing across today's presentation, that there are these opportunities, there are these untapped resources, there are these groups of talented, intelligent, and just engaging people with the courage to teach, that with a bit of support, with a bit of a leg up, with a bit of strategy on the part of collaborating organizations, can move into these full-time classroom roles. So thank you again for having us with you today. David, any final words?
Just to say with the next slide, please, I wanted to introduce you briefly to the people that put this all together. We were the first registered apprenticeship program in the state, and it did take a little bit of work. You've met Stephanie, you've met Dr. DeSalles. I also want to mention Carrie Sigmund, who served as our interpreter, if you will, from Ed Speak to U.S. Department of Labor Speak. She provided that service for us. And Dr. Katie Anderson-Pence, which really laid the groundwork for our training partnership with UCCS. I also want to let you know, I just want to say, I think educators have a pretty well-established legacy of addressing crises in the profession. I think today's presentations really serve as evidence of that. If anybody would like to pursue the course of action that we took, we will make ourselves available. We don't view any of what we've done as proprietary in any way, and please reach out to us. We're happy to help. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. What an exciting set of presentations, and it was really exciting to hear about your partnership and your program. One question that came up is about the UCCS and Callahan partnership. It's evident that there's a really strong partnership among your team. And I just wonder if you can speak to maybe 1 or 2 features of the partnership that facilitated the successful design and implementation of the program, knowing that we won't be able to get into the details, but just curious if 1 to 2 things comes to mind.
You know, Stephanie probably can be speak in more detail about this. What I can say is our apprentices access the instruction remotely, and so it's very agile for them and easy to attach. Stephanie, what would you like to add?
I think there's a big piece about the wraparound services that are provided, because I'm not only their instructor, but I'm also their coach. So I'm able to go out and see them in the field and help them work through their courses as they're going. So then we're able to directly relate what they're learning to what they're doing in the classroom at all times.
I'll also add a shared commitment to the same values and a dedication to making sure that what we do is new, what we do is creative, and what we do is responsive.
you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Steve now.
Great, thank you, Emma. So we do have a couple of other questions that came in through the chat that we'd like to give panelists an opportunity to respond to. But before that, just wanted to solicit some ideas from other folks on the call, specifically to hear about some of the policies and practices that your organizations may have in place that are either being implemented or even those being considered, maybe as a result of hearing some of these ideas today, that are focused on supporting recruitment, preparation, and retention of teachers of color, or teachers in general. So to do this, what we wanted to do is a waterfall chat activity, which you all may have been a part of before on a virtual meeting like this. But essentially, if you have examples of those things, and would type them in the chat, but refrain from submitting them, and we'll submit them all together after just about a minute or so. So again, if you have policies or practices related to the recruitment, preparation, or retention of teachers of color that you're either implementing or considering, and that you'd be willing to share, please type them in the chat box, and I'll give us all about a minute or so, and then invite you to submit them all at once.
Sorry for jumping slides. It took me a minute to find it.
Okay, I'll give folks just another 30 seconds or so. All right, great. Please, if you have typed something in the chat box, please go ahead and submit. Great. All right, so a couple comments. So we've got one that's where diverse workforce is identified as a specific agency goal. Priority on open and honest communication with all stakeholders, enough to talk about what we must do and talk about what we will do. Sorry, enough talk about what we must do, to more of a focus on talking about what we will do. And then in Washington State, the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, the BEST team supports, which is the Beginning Educator Support Team. BEST supports novice educators in Washington through comprehensive induction, and this includes educators of color as an affinity group. And then using roaming the community activities and making ourselves available for pre-advising conversations. So great ideas. Thank you all. Okay, well, let me return to, I've got a few remaining questions that were submitted. Start with, oh, and just to mention, there were a couple links posted in the chat. There was someone who posted a recent volume that was published by the American Educational Research Association focused on BIPOC educators, the Handbook of Research on Teachers of Color and Indigenous Teachers. So you'll find a link to that volume in the chat. And let's see, a couple of questions came up related to the research. So one of them was around, so I'll read this comment. It said, we had strong success with rural retention by providing cohort-based opportunities to obtain masters in education up to 3 years after program completion. And the question was whether we had found other evidence of how long that effect lasts in research. So I'll start with Emma, who talked about the research, and we'll open it up to others on the panel who may be aware of other examples.
Thanks, Steve. I think there so far what we know about is some anecdotal evidence related to the benefit of these kinds of cohort-based models. And there have been studies in general of teacher retention that look at teacher retention over short and long term. A lot of times these studies kind of look at like 1, 2, and 5 year retention. And we know that tends to be more mobility among teachers in their earlier career. They may not necessarily be leaving the profession, but they may be more likely to move from school to school, or that's more related to mobility across schools. But we haven't addressed this specific question in the literature scan that we conducted so far, but it is a really interesting question. Do any of our other presenters have anything they'd like to add?
Great. All right. There were a couple other questions associated with the research. One was around whether there's research related to salary and benefits as a factor that affects retention, and then also whether programs to support teachers, for example, that support obtaining additional degrees were related to retention, and whether they were included as part of professional development activities.
Sure, yeah. So REL Central a few years ago conducted a study in 4 states focused on factors related to teacher retention, recruitment, and attrition, retention, mobility, and attrition. The states included Colorado and 3 other states. And in that study, we found that salary was consistently associated with retention. But there's also research to suggest, it's along with mentoring, quality of relationships between teachers and peers and school leaders. So there's other pieces to the puzzle that must be considered in that, and thinking about those relationships. And I've seen less about the how much degree acquisition is associated with leaving positions, but sometimes we see that teachers who obtain new degrees may move into more leadership focused positions. So they're still being retained in the educator workforce, but maybe not in front of the classroom. Some of the pipeline strategies have been seeking to address these sorts of considerations. And we also are aware of more experimentation with models that allow teachers with increased choice and autonomy in professional learning. Some of these grants, for example, are funded through the U.S. Department of Education. The Education Innovation and Research and Grant Program had a focus on this in the last couple of years, and so there are a few states and districts that are focused on this idea as well around the nation. So we've been working with some of those, and so that's kind of what I want to say about that for now. And I know we are at time, so I'll turn it back to Steve for a conclusion.
Yeah, just a quick wrap up. You saw in the chat that we would love your feedback on this webinar. We're always looking to improve our work, so please, if you have a couple minutes, click on that. And just wanted to let you all know that you'll be receiving an email with access to a recording of this session and also access to the PowerPoint slides that were shared today. And then finally, just to mention, you'll also be getting an email about the next webinar in the series that's going to focus on the perspectives of teachers of color and how some of the features of the pathways and their positions, policies, and practices influence their decisions to stay or leave the teaching profession in Colorado. So being at time, I think we'll wrap up, and just want to say thanks again to all of our presenters and for all of you for joining, and hope you all have a good rest of the afternoon.